Hello, my beautiful cosmic siblings. I hope that you're doing amazing. Today, I want to speak to you about probably one of my favorite zodiac energies, and that is Gemini. I personally really love Geminis. We get along really, really well. So, I want to talk about Geminis, their traits, what it is like to be with them, to hang out with them, to date them. I'm going to give you 5 really powerful sort of guidelines there. So if you're interested in a Gemini, or you might like to, sort of like date a Gemini, these are some things that you want to know. Because if you don't know these things, there'll be red flags all over the place. So this is a very general sort of idea around Gemini. I want you to remember that when we look at your natal chart specifically, there's many, many things that you look at. Nothing is ever just cut and dry and set in stone. So I want you to take all of this with a pinch of salt, more like like a point of reference, so to speak. Okay. And these are for any Gemini placements, really. So Gemini Sun, which will be Geminis born between May the 21st and June the 20th. But that could also be for other Gemini placements. So, for example, my communication is very strong, like 28.3 degrees in Gemini, which is almost in 0 degrees again, because, I call the zodiac houses like the pie slices, like 12 pie slices, and they're like 33 degrees each, a little bit of a discrepancy, but, long story short. And so, depending on your placements as well, and how strongly you place into, this is Bruno, and how strongly you place into the house, and those sort of things will determine what's happening. So if you know your zodiac chart, then you can take a look at it. And if you don't know it, then this is a great opportunity for you to go and check it out. There's many free options available online, even, where you can just go and find out what your placements are. Moon will be for your emotions. How do you emotionally reason? So with my communication being in Gemini, I pretty much think and reason and speak the way that they do, like the faster speaking, the hands, that sort of thing, very fast mind, intellect. I can very easily grasp information just like that. But then also, same as Gemini, I have the tendency to start things very enthusiastically and not necessarily complete them. To sometimes have too many tabs open on my computer of life, or to stretch myself very thinly sometimes, where you kind of overcommit yourself, and then that can cause quite a lot of anxiety. Gemini's, air signs in general, Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra, they tend to be very sort of like subject to anxiety, mental exhaustion, and then subsequently things that goes hand in hand with that, sometimes trouble with the skin, trouble with the eyes, trouble with the chest area, the breathing and stuff like that, because these are all things that are all about, fast processing. Or rather, to put it to you like this, like, you feel that you're out of breath. Sometimes Geminis can feel very exposed. They can feel very vulnerable. So the skin feels like it's not safe. So those sort of things can quite happen with Gemini, because they see so much. Sometimes they actually build up trauma through their lifetime, so they may not want to see so much, and then the body just really copies what goes on the inside. So they often do tend to have trouble with the eyes and things like that. And because they're such beautiful intellectual beings, they get to see all the different possibilities, how they can play out, what could be the possibilities of the possibilities, which can actually contribute towards the tenseness that they can sometimes have, and that can cause them to to be almost scared when they look to the future, which can then sometimes lead to Gemini making fear-filled decisions or fear-fueled decisions. And this is usually where things begin to go south. All right. So, but I mean, I just love my Geminis. Now, I have tried being in a relationship with a Gemini before, and that wasn't quite for me. That wasn't quite for me, because I'm a Cancerian, and as strong as those Gemini traits are, I also have those very strong Cancerian traits. But, Gemini can be such a joy with. So we're going to speak, about you know, how intelligent they are, how their mind processes, what they like in love, their creativity, the little white lies that they tell, you know, that childlikeness that they have, and you know, just how they can summarize people so quickly. Now, I'm not putting these things in what do you call them, timestamps, basically, because I think with any zodiac sign, you want to watch everything. You want to understand these people as best you possibly can, because Gemini is often very misunderstood, and that is usually where the conflict begins to come in. Okay, so you know, just a couple of general things around the energy of Gemini. I think I said my name is Adrian Nelson. Welcome to the video. If it's your first time, you're welcome. If you're coming back, welcome back. If you haven't yet done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the like, and let me know where in the world we are connecting from. What is your zodiac energy? How do you feel about Geminis? You know, let us know. All right. So Gemini, along with Virgo, is ruled by the planet Mercury. Now, Mercury is the planet that is closest to the sun. Mercury moves really, really fast. So I'm going to explain to you just a little bit about Mercury, because sometimes if you explain too much about this, it gets a little confusing. But as I explain this, you will also get to understand why Gemini often do things the way that they do them. Okay. And if you are a Gemini, especially, welcome to the channel. And if you are having the privilege of, you know, having a beautiful life or a relationship or anything like that with a Gemini, they are the creme de la creme, you know. And just because I struggle sometimes to get along with them, because it's almost like stubborn hitting stubborn sometimes, you know, doesn't mean that it's not sort of plausible in other relationships. And I mean, I love them as friends very much. And then just at the end, I'm just going to go through all the different zodiac signs very briefly and let you know how they can sort of rub each other up. The right way, the wrong way. How does a Gemini rub you up? You know, sometimes Geminis can really rub you up the wrong way. They really, really can. But they're such sweethearts. They really, really are, that you just want to love them, you know. So, with the planet Mercury that moves around the sun really fast, you know, with them and Virgo both being ruled by the same planet, I've already made sort of a video like this for Virgo. And so what you basically have is, you will see that these people's minds move very fast, you know, and both Virgo and Gemini, they really like to intellectualize things. They like to understand them. They like to make a very informed decision. But whereas Virgo likes to internalize everything and to understand it internally, so they don't necessarily need to have the experience itself, you know. They can internally have the experience, which can equally lead to, you know, those anxiety and things, the same as Gemini. But then so they will sort of withdraw, Virgos will withdraw a little bit more, you know, whereas Gemini tend to be very in your face. And the more they are confused, the more they can sometimes be in your face. Okay, that is a generalization, but that is a very Gemini sort of thing. And you know, they have this thing where they want to actually physically experience things. So where Virgo just have to experience internally in their mind, Gemini wants to have the actual life experience of it. Okay, Gemini is the third house in sort of like the zodiac pie chart, and it is the house of order. All right. And so, you know, Gemini is in between sort of the house of Taurus, and Taurus is very like, you know, Tauruses can be stubborn, and they can be very set in their ways, and very sort of like tunnel vision sometimes. This is how it must be. This is the way it's going to be, you know. And then on the other end of it is Cancer, which is all about the feelings and the emotions. How does it feel? So Gemini sort of scrambles things up a little bit and say, okay, is there maybe a different way in which it can be done? You know, is there a different way that it can be experienced? So Gemini, in a sense, I can almost say, see all the dimensions of a situation, all the different possibilities, how they can be, how they can, you know, play out and that sort of thing. And so I will say to you that if a Gemini warns you about someone, best you trust them. You know, best you trust them. Because they've got this uncanny ability to meet someone and immediately summarize them in seconds, very accurately. They will know who you are. You know, and sometimes when people are in denial, it's almost like Gemini can't hide what they know and what they feel and what they understand. So somehow you're going to get the communication that maybe they see you're not in the strongest of light. And so sometimes that can cause conflict where people just don't like Geminis. Okay? They sort of govern things like learning and relationship and communication and immediate surroundings. And they're very sharp. They're incredibly sharp. And the thing about Gemini is that they're going to pretend that they're not seeing, that they're not aware of what's going on, you know? But then one day they might just blow up and they might just throw it up in your face, okay? Now, because they're much closer to the sun than Earth, so their orbits are smaller, their year is like plus minus 88 days, you know? So they kind of, even though Mercury moves around the sun, the planet itself orbits slower on itself. So they can sort of have the equivalent experience of 2 years in one day. All right? So do you see that mind? Lot of stuff in a very short period of time. You know, experiencing time, the passing of time, you know, possibilities coming around and stuff like that, faster than other people. So it makes them very sharp, very, very sharp, because they kind of, it's you know, it's just like anything about Gemini, it's almost like if they touch you like this, it's almost like they can immediately pick up all the information from you. So they are these very natural sort of empaths, you know. The thing about being an empath, not necessarily, but mostly, that, you know, everybody goes around like, I'm an empath, but usually people's natural empath ability, but when it's so strong, a lot of times it is triggered by childhood traumas and fears when the mind didn't know what to do. And so you had to become very hyper vigilant and very aware of what's happening around you to know how to control a situation, to know how to prevent a situation, to know how to de-escalate a situation. That's usually where empath ability is coming from, you know? And so this is something that Gemini has very naturally. So when Gemini in childhood years, when they experience trauma, it is way worse for them, all right? It's also very hard for Gemini to lose loved ones. You know, when somebody passes, it's very hard. I think most of them pretty much never get over it, you know? And so people will sometimes be that you're a little bit too extra because they tend to be a little bit dramatic. But I like that, all right? Sorry. So, you know, let's kind of get into these points a little bit, all right? Also, just to let you know, they're very adaptable. They are very nice people. They really, really are, you know? Now, people have this thing that sometimes Gemini can be a gem and sometimes, you know, they can be the direct opposite of a gem, okay? Which is true. You don't want to get on the wrong side of a Gemini that's not in the best mood. But what I do like about them is that they always try to be accommodating to everybody. They really, really do. Okay? Often so much that it can be to their detriment. Okay? So they can sometimes overcommit themselves. And then they can't get to everything. And that is where that whole sort of flakiness and thing is coming from. You know? Because they're very in the moment. They're very here. You know, so they're like, oh, that's such an exciting idea. Let's do that. And all the air signs do it. Gemini does it. Libra does it especially. And Gemini does it. The thing about Libra is that Libra will stew. And sometimes they will get out of a situation just by simply lounging about. You know? They can take extreme strain, Libras. Aquarius will maybe find a different way to do the same thing, but with Gemini, they can get so almost like in the middle of everything that it's their mind just screams and they don't know what to do. And I mean, these people can go without sleep for days. You know, they've got this creative expression thing, but then they crash and then they want to sleep for days. And so sometimes when they overexert themselves, they will just switch off the phone, get into bed, close the windows, and they sleep. And most people never see this part of Gemini. So when you get to see this part, they really trust you. But then they often feel very vulnerable because you've got to see this part of them, and it's almost like you can use it against them. And I mean, trust me when I tell you, it can get wild. It can get very wild, you know. Um, so let's speak about the intelligence. You know, as I said, these people can pick up on knowledge just like this, you know. And they have this tendency to, you know, a lot of people call Gemini very direct. But because anxiety, more often than not, you know, runs sort of hand in hand with them because their mind is just so fast, which makes them very adaptable. But I think they make it seem so easy that a lot of people don't always realize that they are, you know, feeling stressed, that they're feeling overwhelmed. So with Gemini, you really want to be kind to them because honestly, I tell you, honestly, these people have the most gentle hearts. But you also need to be firm with them. You need to make them understand. You know, it's like this. And I mean, it's not really something that I particularly like to do. But if you need them there by 4, you need to tell them, you have to stress it by 2:30, they need to be there latest and they have to believe you. Now, of course, this depends a lot with whatever else is happening in your chart, because I know some Geminis that are super, super good with time, you know, but then sometimes that also causes them stress. They are very easily distracted, you know. Oh, there goes the butterfly type of thing, you know. But they are incredibly intelligent and they tend to pick up knowledge very easily. What happens with that, especially in like learning institutions, if Gemini is not interested in what you are sharing, you can balance yourself on your left. If they're not interested, they're not interested, you know. And so, sorry, they can get this very dreamy look in their eyes because then whatever's going in the mind is more exciting in what they are planning. So people can call them disrespectful, they don't care. A lot of times people have things like they've got, you know, some mental disease, they can't focus and stuff like that. They do tend to sometimes focus better under pressure, okay? But then there's not normally a healthy way to go about it. So I think one of the biggest lessons for Gemini in this world is to learn to prioritize effectively and to, you know, by doing so to manage their mindset. But I can tell you one thing for certain, fear is not going to keep these people from doing what they need to do. They can be literally pissing their pants and they're still going to go do their thing. Very brave, very, very brave, okay? They, like all air signs, they can sometimes have a tendency towards a little bit of a violent streak. But, you know, whereas Aquarius maybe would want to sort of maybe just, you know, kick your lights out and, you know, like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know what happened. Next thing I knew, they were on the floor. You know, Libra will often completely avoid a situation until they, you know, explode and stuff, but that normally passes quite quickly. Whereas with Gemini, they usually, they see what you're doing, they're going to see if you're going to change, but then it's like they just snap. And trust me when I tell you, you don't want a Gemini snapping on you in public or where other people can hear. Those people don't care if the neighbors are hearing, they don't care if it's if you are at a wake or a baptism or like whatever's going down. If they lost it now. And do not try to scream louder than them. They are going to win. I promise you, they're going to win. They're going to win. I promise you. They can sometimes bring out the aggroness in you as well, you know. Especially when you deal with a Gemini that's not doing well. And especially when they told you something. Because I think they're like these beautiful beings. So sometimes when they say something, I think people don't always take them that seriously. And then they say it over and over, and then they just explode because they're not feeling heard. Okay? I don't know, they just have these beautiful features. And the thing with Gemini is, it doesn't matter what age they are or, you know, what body weight they are, even if they have a skin condition going on. These people are just attractive. There's something magnetic about them. We are drawn to Geminis like a moth to a flame. And it's that exciting dance of a moth between a flame. You want to have the light, and the light may burn you, then you want to see how you can maneuver around it, so they a trip, but they're a cool trip. you know yes, they're a very cool trip. Now, in love, when a Gemini is in love, and they don't easily commit, they really, really don't, but because they know that they come with a whole lot of crazy. It's not like they don't know it. They know it. So that's point number two. Very intelligent. Point number two in love. And when they're disappointed, they're really disappointed. So they never really quite get over something. So they're always afraid that a hurtful past situation might repeat itself, especially when they really needed you and you weren't there for them. All right? Which can happen sometimes, because when a Gemini is in pain, they have a lot to deal with. They are, They can go from this person that's all light to this person that is so dark. But if you can just be with them and you don't try to change them and you let them do what they need to do, sometimes they need to go off on their little trips and stuff like that. You just let them do it. They will love you. The thing with Gemini is, don't try to hold them like this. It's not going to work. Okay? No matter how committed the relationship is, they need that sense of freedom. And they like the little cuddly stuff. Very much. All these cute little cuddly stuff. These people also like food. But all the cute little cuddly stuff, there's something very childlike about them. Even in their reasoning sometimes, in their thinking sometimes, in their expression sometimes. So there's something very innocent about them. Okay? And sometimes they're just not going to be able to deal with the stress and the pressure. They can't. Okay? They are excellent lovers. Intimacy with Gemini is everything. But for them, intimacy and foreplay, it's everything. Like, you can make a cheese and tomato grilled sandwich with a Gemini, and it is the most, erotic experience of your life, or just a heartwarming experience. They're just beautiful people. They really, really are. But they can be quite a challenge in love. And Gemini's got this thing of, they always test you. They sort of put you, Scorpio also likes to do that. They sort of put you through your test and your paces, and a lot of times they don't easily trust, especially when they've been hurt before. But Gemini trust goes in levels. There's trust for friendship, there's trust for acquaintances, there's trust for colleagues, there's trust for love. It goes in different categories, And so Gemini has this thing that they like to test you. They will almost want to show you the worst part of themselves to see if you can cope with that. And here's something funny also, that when you try, for some reason, people just want to sleep with Geminis because there's something about them, there's a spark about them, But when you push it too much, they tend to be used to that, and they don't like that. They like a deeper sense of intellect, okay? And when you can respect them and don't push them, it's almost then they want to be with you. They tend to want what they can't have, okay? Which is truthfully why they can sometimes get bored in a relationship. And that's why they're sometimes so careful to be in one, all right? They're incredibly creative, point number 3. They're able to make money just like that. Keeping on to the money is sometimes an entirely different story, But they are very creative in their expression. And I think when Gemini doesn't create and doesn't express, to them it's very hard. It's very difficult for them to stick to things like 9-to-5 jobs and things like that, Also, just sort of circling back to the love thing. It's a bit of a good and a bit of a bad thing, but Geminis, when they truly love you, when they truly open their heart, they see no fault with you. None. Nothing. So they can stand to stay in an abusive relationship way longer. And even if they've been in an abusive relationship, they may want to retry again or be friends. And so that's also something that you need to know if you're going to date Gemini. They have this uncanny ability to remain very good friends with their exes, no matter how it ended. And it can be that very close friendship where they won't be cheating on you, but it may appear that they are. because they're very hands-on. Another funny thing about Gemini sometimes, especially when they come from pain, they feel ignored and things like that, they can sometimes tend to go to the extremes. So they will either sleep with someone else or create the impression that you will believe that they're sleeping with that other person, or may sleep with that other person, or may sort of connect with that person instead of you, if they feel that you're not giving them attention. So they sometimes tend to look for attention through fights. Okay? They tend to sometimes not know when to stop. So that can be a bit of a thing. Okay? Yeah. These little white lies that they tell, the fourth point here. Gemini have this thing like it's just a white lie, and they don't like to hurt people, so they often tell a white lie to get out of a tricky situation. They don't want to hurt someone, they don't want to have to deal with all of the stuff that's probably going to come with it, so they tend to tell these little white lies, which, let's just say that Gemini's perception of a white lie and other people's perception of a white lie is often not the same, and that's how they tend to get themselves into problems. So if you're with a Gemini, you want to encourage them to speak out, because a lot of times they don't speak because the relationship goes well. The friendship, the connection, whatever it is, the relationship goes well. And now they know you a little bit. Remember, they summarize you quickly, so they can think that if you see this part of them, you're not going to want to be with them anymore and that sort of things. And they don't want that. They definitely don't want that. Okay? It's almost like, you don't leave me, I will leave you. Okay? Sorry. I will just say that if you were Gemini, you need to be able to sort of go with the flow. But you also need to understand when to set the boundaries, because they will see how far they can push the boundaries. And if you let them push it too far, they will not respect you. So it is that fine balance between giving them freedom, but knowing when they're trying to take you for a ride. That sort of thing. Okay? But beautiful people to have around, honestly. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful peeps to have around. I often find that when people are spending a lot of time with Gemini, or they can make their relationship work, there's something youthful that comes in. That person looks younger, they feel younger, they reason more young. You know? These people's got very good hearts, which again sometimes can lead to some problems. They can become overly accommodative, you know. There is often a problem that happens in relationships. Okay. Now, let me quickly summarize for you just Gemini, typical Gemini energy with the typical other energies of the zodiac. So Aries and Gemini, as long as both are sort of in a healthy mindset, can actually get along quite well. Okay. But egos can come very strongly into play here. They both can be quite stubborn, very set in their ways, must be like this, that sort of thing. So they will either get on really well, or they might prospectively kill each other. Okay. Taurus and Gemini, also quite good potential there, as long as both can be a bit more bendable and understand that they kind of got what they would call separate needs, but very much the same. Gemini and Gemini, beautiful. But the thing with Gemini also is that when Gemini falls in love, for example, they will do anything. They will give up anything. They want to spoil you. They want to give you beautiful stuff. They're very good at making plans. They can make every moment feel special. But sometimes they're too much in the year and not looking at the future so much. You know, remember in the beginning we said? And so that can sometimes lead to problems, where it can become a little bit like two blind people leading each other across the highway. So two Geminis in relationship can be amazing, but it can actually be destructive. Okay. Gemini and Cancer. Now, a lot of people is going to say that Gemini and Cancer don't get along, but I think they get along quite well. All right. Granted that maybe Cancer can sometimes, you know, not be so overly sensitive, and Gemini maybe try to be slightly more sensitive. This is in the point of view from the other person, by the way. All right. It's funny when Gemini and Cancer gets together. There's this couple that are always fighting. They're always fighting. And people will be like, what are you all fighting about? Can you stop fighting? And they will both say, we're not fighting. Gemini can sometimes pick a fight when they feel ignored to get the attention. Okay? Cancer can do the same. Gemini and Leo. that's a bit of a fly in the jam sometimes. Okay? Because Leo likes to set things down and to consider everybody, but at some point Leo might feel exhausted because they can get to a point where they almost feel like they have to almost micromanage and keep Gemini safe. And Geminis can sometimes like being babied. Okay? It always depends on the level of maturity, what's happening in the rest of the chart, all of that sort of things. Gemini and Virgo tends to get along quite well because they're both ruled by Mercury. All right, there might be some communication problems there, but in general, they tend to get along quite well. Gemini and Libra, yeah, good potential. Good potential there. Gemini and Scorpio, also very good potential there. Okay, Gemini and Sagittarius, Gemini might sometimes feel Sagittarius to be a little bit sergeant major for them. And even Gemini might sometimes feel that Sagittarius just jump from things too quickly because Gemini tends to do that. They tend to have all these unfinished things, and Sagittarius can do the same. So they can give each other a little bit of headaches. Or they can join the game together. All right. Gemini and Capricorn, generalizing, Capricorn can sometimes tend to be a little bit attention seeking. A little bit self-righteous even sometimes when they're sort of in the darker side of Capricorn. And Gemini can just feel that they're too dramatic. Now it's quite funny because Gemini, they've got a slight tendency to gossip. And not necessarily with the intention to be malicious, but they might not always realize that they're being malicious. And so Capricorn can hold up a mirror that they don't like. And sometimes Gemini can feel that they have to almost micromanage Capricorn, which they don't like because it's an additional task. All right. It's important to know that with all zodiac signs, you can make things work. These are just general things. Okay. Gemini and Aquarius, they usually get along quite well because they see each other's bullshit for each other's bullshit, so they get along well. Gemini and Pisces can sometimes also be a bit of a sensitive energy for Gemini. Okay, so let me know if you're Gemini, where in the world you are, how this resonates, how you feel around this, what your experiences with Gemini, and look at maybe the other videos. I already have one for Aquarius, Virgo, and Cancer. Those are the three that I have. This is the fourth one. I'll do for the other zodiac houses. But, let me know what you think. And I look forward to connecting with you on the next video.